Hey there, in this video we're going to do a little bit of a side topic, talk about args and kwargs. And the reason it comes up now is suppose I've got some kind of plot and I want to customize it. So I've got plt.plot with matplotlib already imported. And if I go and I look at the help here for plot, what we see is something that might look a little bit new to you, is star args and star kwargs. And you'll say, well, what does that mean? In fact, if you're really unlucky and you look at the documentation for a function, it's just star args and star kwargs with nothing else listed in there. So if we go on and read all this documentation, and there's a lot of it, especially if we go farther down here, kwargs are line properties. So it kind of gives us a hint, and if here's actually a list of all of what they could be. So we're going to talk about a Python feature in this video, and then we'll come back to customizing our plots in a follow-up video. So args and kwargs. First one, star args. What this represents is any number of positional arguments is what that represents. And it doesn't have to be named args. The part that actually matters is the star at the beginning here. Typically they're called args, but they could be called anything. So let me show you an example where I use a different name. Let's say I want to make a function called say hi. And I want say hi to be able to take any number of names, not just one name or three names, but any number at all. How could I write that function? So you might think, well, maybe I could just have a really long list of names like name 1, name 2, name 3, and I can use default arguments like equals none for all these. But that would be an awful lot of typing, because maybe I need like 100 names. So your shortcut here is to do a star args, or in this case, just so it's a little bit more understandable, star names. What this represents is any number of arguments can go into this function. Okay, so then what do they look like inside? So to start out inside, let's just print them. So we'll just print names. I'm printing it without the star. If I try to say print star names, it's not going to behave quite like I'd expect here. So let's just try it out and see what it actually prints. Okay, so say hi and go with the Three Stooges. We'll do Larry, Curly, and Moe. So what happened? It printed, if we look at this, it printed a tuple. So what happens here with star names is you give a tuple, right? This is actually a tuple. Anything with commas in Python is actually a tuple. So we give these tuple of names into my function, and they're now going to live in a tuple named names. So what I can do is inside my function, I can take apart that tuple of names and do things with it. For example, let's make a for loop. So we'll do for name and names. And we'll print hello, and then we'll print the name. Hello name. All right, now if we run this, it'll say hello Larry, hello Curly, hello Moe, for however many names we add into this. Who is that fourth stooge? Let's say, I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm gonna get it wrong. I'll just make myself one of the stooges. There we go. So no matter how many arguments we have, we can do that with star names. This can also be used the other way around. So if you have a long tuple of arguments that you want to pack together, let me show you by way of example. So let's say I've got a function that's like specifically prints three things. So we'll call it like 3-item printer. Again, these are just toy examples. The actual function is not very helpful, but just for way of example. So it takes 3 arguments, 1, 2, 3, and its job is to print them. So an entirely pointless function for us. But rather than having to type them in 1, 2, 3, let's say this is the situation. I have a list of items, or a tuple of items. Doesn't actually matter if it's a list or tuple, and I've got 3 things in it. Okay, let's say the 3 things are, I already did 3 stooges, so let's do, I don't know, let's do 3 fruits. So we'll do apple, pear, and grape. Okay, these are my 3 things. And I want to pass these things to a 3-item printer. So rather than having to do 3-item printer and then do items 0, items 1, items 2, the shortcut I can use is with this star args type notation. So I can call, thought Tab would help me out here. There we go, 3-item printer. And instead of doing individual arguments 1, 2, 3, I can just feed in star items. And what this will do is it will unpack that tuple. So the star here means take the tuple apart. It actually means the same thing here. But here, I think it's a lot easier just to think of it as any number of arguments, stuff them in the tuple named names. Here, this says take the tuple named items and take it apart. And this will work as if I called it with individually apple, pear, grape. So now what about kwargs? It stands for keyword arguments. Once again, it's actually just the double asterisk that matters. The name can be anything at all. Typically the name is kwargs though. So let's make a toy function to play with this idea. Let's call this one title maker. And it's going to take in some list of, well, really dictionary of titles. So the single asterisk here takes a tuple, this one takes a dictionary. After all, a keyword argument is like arg equals this, or arg equals that. And that can be represented like the key value pairs of a Python dictionary. So titles here is going to be a dictionary. And in fact, we can check that out just by printing what it is when we call this. So let's call title maker, and we're going to give it a keyword argument. So we're going to say Kermit equals frog, okay, just to see what it does. And what happens here is titles now, this thing gets put into a dictionary where the key is Kermit and the value is frog. Let's add another thing in here. Let's do Vlad equals impaler. So now we have a second key value in our dictionary, Vlad and impaler. So now let's fix this up to print something a little bit more sensible. So what we'll do here is I want to iterate through that dictionary. Dictionaries have a nice built-in method called items. I guess there's no documentation on that, but anyway, what items does is it takes the dictionary and it splits it apart into a tuple of key and values. So I can write this as for key comma value in titles.items. So I'm using a tuple in my for loop where the items takes the dictionary and splits it apart into sequences of keys and values. So for key comma value in title.items, I can print a key the value. So it'll be like Kermit the Frog. If we try that out, it says Kermit the Frog, Vlad the Impaler. So it's just a toy example, but how we can use keyword arguments to have a function that takes any number of keyword arguments. So the first case is any number of regular positional arguments, meaning they have to be in order at the beginning. And the second one is any number of keyword arguments where you have to specify them by name. And so basically I can make up entirely new arguments and feed them into my function. So let's look at a more practical use for these kinds of things. I'm going to make a new function called verbose plot. And it's going to take not regular arguments, but args and kwargs. And you are allowed to mix these with regular arguments, but I'm going to do one that's just args, so just positional arguments and just keyword arguments. And its job is to go through, so for every argument in the positional arguments, I just want to print it. And for comma value in kwargs.items. So again, this splits apart the dictionary into its keys and values. I'm going to print out key equals value. So far, this is just a function that prints its arguments and its keyword arguments. Let's do something with it. Let's use it to call the plot function. And into the plot function, I want to pass all the arguments and all of the keyword arguments. See, the thing is, whether or not this function is written expecting star args and star kwargs doesn't actually matter. Python will just unpack them and it'll take them. So if it knows about a certain keyword argument, it will use it. If it doesn't, depending on how the code's written, it will usually just ignore it. It might throw an error message if it's looking for that kind of thing. So our usage here for this kind of function would be, let's do a plot with x, y, and let's even give it a keyword argument color. This is actually a legal keyword argument for plots. It changes the color of the plot to red. And we need to have x and y values to plot for this to actually make any sense. So we'll do x equals, go values up to 10, and we'll just make y the same thing as x. All right, so if I forgot to do show. So you can see I get this extra junk if I forget to do show. That's why I usually like to do show. All right, so it made a nice line that was red, and that's how a plot normally works. Okay, now let's call verbose plot. See what our version does. Oh, it's mad about something. Oh, it's because I called it. Yeah, I did the wrong thing. It doesn't live in the plot module. It lives in the code I wrote. So just regular verbose plot here. And it's going to print out these are my x values, these are my y values. I use the key value pair color equals red, and then I just call the regular plot function to make the plot down here. So again, I'm not saying that you will necessarily write a lot of code like this, but you will see it in the documentation. And what it means is any number of positional arguments, and this means any number of keyword arguments.